The Beauty of Shōgun. Before you watch this, if you haven't watched the show, go watch the show. What are you even doing? You have to watch this show. And if you don't care, then I guess let's just start the video. I almost didn't watch Shogun at all. The only reason I had thought about watching the trailer was because Hiroyuki Tsunada was in it, and I knew him from Westworld, or else I would have skipped it. After watching the trailer, I was intrigued, and thank God that I did. This has become one of my favorite shows. You could probably go back and catch new things every time you watch it. Everything in the show was so good, from the acting, characters, setting, the scene, plot, story, and even the dialogue. How they handled the translating and not making it boring was just peak. From the subtle details and also the foreshadowing. I have a few things that I want to talk about, but honestly, there were so many, I can't remember them all or even talk about them all in one video. The tea house. The whole scene when Mariko, Blackthorn, and Kiku, especially during Kiku's monologue, when she goes to sit to Mariko's side and the camera starts to move to Blackthorn's view and it starts to become blurry. Mariko translates Kiku's words as if she's the one saying them back to Blackthorn. And in a way, she is. The dinner scene. The moment when Blackthorn and Bantaro are drunk, trying to outdrink each other, the tension in the room is there, especially after Blackthorn brings up his escape and war. Yet he doesn't realize it and motions the bow. The shot of Bantaro shooting the arrow at the post Blackthorn picked, so close to hitting Mariko that the air off the bow moves her hair. The scene was so gut-wrenching itself, but how Mariko really isn't scared to die and how Bantaro views his wife in this scene. Also, I'm probably gonna mispronounce the names because it's been a minute since I watched the show. I watched the last episode when it came out, so the pronunciations aren't that deep in my head anymore. And like reading them off the script isn't the same as hearing them because the way English, you know what I mean, bro, you know what I mean. But I'm gonna try my best. I'll end it with another sad one. In the last episode, Blackthorn and Fuji sitting in the same spots in the house, yet empty space where Mariko used to sit. How Blackthorn even looks over to look for her knowing she's gone. Going into the next part with parallels from the beginning to the end. Later on, Fuji tells him while they are on the boat the same thing Mariko told her when she was going to have to witness her son being committed to the Seppuku Pact. She said, "Let her hands be the last to hold her." She said that to Blackthorn. How Blackthorn is less reactive and loud at the end than he was in the beginning of the show. When he confronts Toranaga and starts yelling Teki, it breaks the growth that he has made by adapting to Japan. The need for him wanting to be the enemy was so strong that it broke the growth that he had made at this point. Omi and Blackthorn. When Omi first went to get Blackthorn's weapons in the, I think, episode 2 or 3, it's a whole altercation. To Fuji even getting involved in resisting handing them over, pointing the guns at Omi to leave. Where in the last episode, Omi is nervous about how it will go down due to the last time, but Blackthorn willingly hands them over and Fuji stays behind looking on. Now to Toranaga. The character of Toranaga was so intriguing. I was always trying to figure out what he was thinking because the character rarely lets anything show. He only breaks in 2 instances. Well, 3 at the end with Yabushiba. Side note, I don't talk about him really that much in the video, but like this is a good example. Unlike Toranaga's son, Toranaga's son did a good role because obviously he's supposed to be annoying, but Yabushiba, like, you don't like him, but he was funny. But yeah, like, he's still a piece of shit, but like, he's still funny. But the other 2 are Hiromatsu's death scene when he talks to Mariko in the same episode at the end of the last episode. And also in the last episode when talking about her to his wives. Talking about Mariko to his wives. In the meeting with his generals, they were really ready to commit treason, which would lead to them fighting and most likely killing Toranaga in the end, by their hand or civil conflict within his army. I found Omi crying in this scene, his realization of war really was, also him not knowing what he's fighting for anymore. He sheds a tear while this is going on. Also, Toranaga's son had just died. I don't think Omi cared about him at all, but it was someone who was a peer, who was also on an equal playing field compared to the veterans. How naive of war was now gone to him. How Nagukaru was wishing for a beautiful death or idolizing war and death itself to die sleeping. Back to the general scene, Crimson Sky. When Toranaga surrendered, he mentions it, but no one outside of his people who know of it know its real meaning. Why I knew he hadn't given up, but I just didn't know how it would work without being obvious. After Naokaru's death, it is explained that he is to go to Osaka unarmed with his army. So that was how I thought they would get there, but still, how can you win a war with no weapons? They start dropping clues from the priest being sent to report what he saw, subtle things here and there to show that he hasn't given up. Till the general scene. Hiromatsu doesn't think he has given up, but isn't sure until this moment. Yet, if he doesn't speak up, the treason will happen. Why he had to go through with committing seppuku. Also because he had stated that he would. This altercation, the close-ups on the actors was so good. This scene was one of my favorites. When Hiromatsu is talking to Bantaro, he who is going to second him, he tells him that he cannot commit seppuku just how Mariko didn't want him to earlier in the same episode in the tea scene. Telling him how now he will know how it is to be deprived of something. Well, I think he might feel it a little bit, but I think it was more to save his son's life than it was the feeling of the words. He then tells Bantaro to trust in Toranaga even when it looks like he's giving up. Because, as we know now, Crimson Sky is still happening. Why at the end of the episode 8, I thought the plan was to rush the castle with Blackthorn on the boat. They could still use the cannons with Mariko to convince him, but I was wrong. Crimson Sky. Crimson Sky herself, Mariko. I knew she had a big role to play, but couldn't put my finger on it, especially after learning that she and Ochiba were friends. I didn't think her killing Ochiba was what she wanted, so could it just be overthrowing the lords? I couldn't understand why, like how the Crimson Sky would happen. Let's just take a moment to talk about episode 9. I think it was my favorite episode overall. But Toranaga asked Mariko over and over if she was ready for Crimson Sky, even when she was trying to commit seppuku too early. To him, being frustrated with her because she wasn't prepared for what was to come. Mariko was also intended to die once she entered that castle, to give honor to her family name, but also to bring down Ishido's plan. Bringing me to my next point of Toranaga and the women around him. How the only people he trusted with his plan were Mariko, Lady Kiri, and his other wife. I don't know why he wouldn't tell Hiromatsu, being his most loyal friend, as to what Crimson Sky was, or that it would still happen. I thought maybe because Yabushiba, but he wouldn't tell him, but yet these 3 women knew and were involved, if not from the start, but at the end. In episode 8, after everything has happened, he is talking with Mariko, and his voice breaks, cracking, and showing his emotions to Mariko. He trusts and confides in her about what just happened, finally asking her if she was ready. Mariko really was the queen in his chess game. Mariko was portrayed as a pawn, but was Toranaga's queen by his side. Physically in scenes, but also hidden. And like in chess, his strongest weapon. Side note, I also don't know anything about chess, but I'm pretty sure the queen is the strongest. When he releases his hawk, he tells it to have many daughters. Daughters. I thought it was strange. It stood out to me because it's always sons. In everything you see, it's always they want to have sons to pass down their inheritance or whatever. So they couldn't inherit from their father. But yet he said daughters. I think it's because of the woman he is surrounded by is why he would have this opinion. In the show, his sons are not present, and the one that is, to be honest, was useless and ends up dying. And then even in the line when he's talking to his wives, he's almost saying it like Nagakoto's death doesn't really affect him because he just has another son to replace him with the baby that was just born. But how in the end his most loyal supporters are dead and disloyal ones are alive, except obviously Yabushiba. Why Toranaga is terrorizing the village because of the ship being sunk is an excuse to push his cause. A little side note that I caught was the spies. We know he has spies everywhere. When in Edo, his city, in episode 8, we see how people stare at Blackthorn and Alvito, the priest. It could be because they are outsiders and the church isn't welcome there. Why they were so desperate to put a church there in the first place. But I also saw it as them being Toranaga spies. If you go back and watch the scene of them talking on the street, you can see a woman in a mask and a man pass by them watching them, giving them dirty looks. Now, back to the hawk. Toranaga himself is a hawk. In the monologue, he tells his son he's the hawk that doesn't go for his easy fruit. That leads to the trap. He gets his own meal, unlike Blackthorn and Yabushiba. Throughout the show, he is also symbolized as a hawk, being perched up in a lot of his scenes. Even in the end 2 scenes of him, he is perched up on a hill or a cliff. I'll end it on Toranaga and his plan. I feel like people are going to say how he planned it all along, but it's not how people would think. This was always his angle, him being Shogun, but to say he planned everything is just wrong. What he does is, like he says, he reads the wind. Whatever is thrown at him, he uses it to his advantage. From his subject interrupting him, to leading to him committing seppuku, ending his line, to leading to Fuji becoming Blackthorn's consort, to having Blackthorn be used against the lords, to having Muji going undercover decades ago, to his son killing the messenger, to his son dying, to Hiromatsu committing seppuku, to Blackthorn and Yabushiba betraying him in episode 8, to Yabushiba betraying him in episode 9, again, to Mariko's death, to then him using it again later to leave Edo, to Ochiba no longer wanting to side with Ishido, to the ship being sunk, to Blackthorn being used to rule out disloyalist, to him becoming Shogun. Anyways, this show was just so good, and if you can tell, I didn't go into deep or talk about Mariko or the other woman as much. I plan on making another video on the woman of Shogun after this one, so if you want to see it, it should be out in May, hopefully. What did you think of the show? Did you have any theories? Honestly, the only theory I have with no real, kinda evidence is that the Taiko's heir is Toranaga's son. Hear me out. The main reason I think this is the Taiko is infertile. He can't have kids because how do all the consorts not get pregnant but one? It can't be all the women. It has to be him. How did Ochiba get pregnant? I think Toranaga by himself or with Daeon set things into plan that the heir was his. And if he's Shogun, his blood would be inherited. Obviously, Daeon wouldn't be involved in this part, but more of the part that they're just being an heir in general. Why I think Ochiba doesn't like him other than the obvious of him killing his father. Her father. If he's behind the Taiko being killed, she fears he'll tell the truth or take them both out. But yeah. What did you think of the show? what did you catch? And remember, all I do is lie.